The galaxy's most influential council, the United Intergalactic Assembly, was a body of species that had shaped the varied fabric of space travel, diplomacy, and warfare across the stars. It was composed of the most intelligent and ancient civilizations, the Volkari, masters of energy manipulation, the Kaifar, brilliant tacticians and warriors, and the Lissar, whose empathy and wisdom had brokered peace between countless races. Together, they'd built an empire of cooperation, trade, and peace. But now, something had shaken the very foundation of their unity: the rise of humanity. For decades, humans had been a curiosity at the edge of the galaxy. The Assembly had watched Earth from afar, distant and inconsequential. Their planet was chaotic, their technology primitive. But lately, reports began to trickle in from all corners of space. Something strange was happening with humanity. Strange whispers, wild rumors. Some even began to call them the new titans of the stars. But the most disturbing rumor of all came from an unlikely source. The Zorith, an ancient and highly secretive race known for their impeccable intelligence. "We must discuss Earth," Valok, the Typhar warlord, declared. His voice was cold, the weight of thousands of battles lingering in every word. "The Zorith have contacted us. They have seen firsthand the humans' brutality in combat. They don't even have a word for overkill." The room fell silent. The phrase echoed like a dark omen. Overkill. It was an alien concept to most species. Wars were fought with control, strategy, and precision. The goal was always victory with minimal damage, minimal loss. But the idea that a species could take things too far, that they could fight with excess power, was foreign, almost laughable. Overkill. Talix, a Lissar diplomat, scoffed. How could they not? It's reckless. Unintelligent. Perhaps, Valok said, his red eyes narrowing. But the Zorith were caught off guard. They encountered a human soldier in combat, a single soldier who annihilated an entire battalion of Zorith troops using primitive earth weaponry. The battle was swift and brutal, more intense than any conflict the Zorith had ever experienced. And the soldier showed no hesitation. The Zorith said that the human didn't even need to fight. He could have walked away, but instead he wiped them out. One soldier. Talix's voice was filled with disbelief. That can't be true. Valok's expression hardened. The Zorith are not fools. They are intelligent. They know what they saw. But why? The Lissar diplomat asked, leaning forward, her antennae twitching in confusion. Why would one human soldier do that? What could drive them to such madness? "We don't know yet," Valok said grimly. "But we do know that humanity does not fight the same way we do. They fight with a ferocity, a passion, that is unlike anything we've encountered. And that is why we must prepare. The galaxy is changing." The room hummed with tension. Some species had already begun to speculate about the humans' potential. The Keteri, a race of giant, hulking creatures, whispered that humanity had the power to take down entire fleets, if not entire civilizations. The Kthar, masters of diplomacy and information, feared that humanity might not just be a threat on the battlefield, but also in the way they approached trade and alliances. The debate was soon interrupted by a series of transmissions from the Zorith, who had been closely monitoring humanity's movements. Valok's face grew darker as he listened, nodding grimly. They've encountered more humans. And once again, the outcome is unsettling. Every engagement is a victory for them. The Zorith said it themselves. Humanity doesn't just win, he continued. They destroy. They leave nothing behind. And then the room fell silent again. No one spoke. The Council of the Galaxy, the most powerful and feared races in the universe, could only watch, horrified, as a single question echoed in their minds. What had humanity become? The Zorith were known throughout the galaxy for their precision, intelligence, and cold calculation. For centuries, they had been the unseen hand behind many of the galaxy's most pivotal events. their covert operations always shrouded in secrecy. But when they were tasked with gathering intelligence on Earth, they had not anticipated encountering a force that would append their decades of knowledge about warfare. A team of Zorith agents, handpicked for their skills in stealth and observation, was dispatched to Earth. Their mission was simple: observe, learn, and report. Earth was still a relatively unknown entity, a wild card among the stars, and the Zorith needed to understand what they were up against. At first, everything appeared as expected. Earthlings were primitive, easily manipulated by misinformation, their military technology seemingly rudimentary compared to the advanced weapons used by the Zorith. The Zorith agents infiltrated human strongholds, observing the mundane routines of the planet's population. They watched as humans bickered over trivial matters and waged petty conflicts in their borders. But the Zorith were patient. They had seen chaos before. They knew that beneath humanity's seemingly fragile exterior, something far darker stirred. What they did not expect was the sheer intensity of human violence. One particular event would seal the fate of the Zorith operatives. In a small town in the United States, a seemingly routine conflict erupted. A small group of insurgents attempted to overthrow a local government facility, aiming to take control of vital resources. To most observers, it was just another insignificant rebellion, easily handled. But the Zorith, observing from the shadows, were not prepared for what followed. The humans didn't respond with calculated force, nor did they seek to contain the situation. Instead, they unleashed a brutal counterattack. A small unit of elite soldiers, armed with conventional weapons, systematically wiped out the insurgents with terrifying precision. But it wasn't just the soldiers' tactics that shocked the Zorith, it was the sheer scale of destruction that followed. The humans didn't simply neutralize the threat, they obliterated it. Every building that might have housed a threat was destroyed, every escape route blocked. The insurgents were hunted down with an efficiency that left no room for mercy. The soldiers didn't just win. They made sure there was no question about who was in control. They left no survivors. The Zorith agents watched in stunned silence as the humans tore apart not just the insurgents, but the very infrastructure of their own planet, seemingly without hesitation. It was overkill in the truest sense of the word. What the Zorith hadn't anticipated was how the humans embraced their violence. There was no remorse, no pity, just an overwhelming drive to ensure that there would be no future resistance. The humans didn't fight to defeat their enemies. They fought to make sure those enemies could never rise again. In the aftermath, as the dust settled, one Zorith agent, unable to resist the urge to learn more, decided to investigate further. He infiltrated the ruins of the destroyed facility, attempting to gather data. What he found only deepened the mystery. The humans had left nothing. No traces of their enemies, no signs of struggle. It was as if the insurgents had never existed at all. As the Zorith agent relayed this information back to their command, the message was clear. Earth was unlike any other civilization. They didn't fight in the ways the galaxy understood. The Zorith were beginning to fear what they had once dismissed as an insignificant species. The agent's final words were chilling. They don't even need advanced technology to win. Their true strength lies in their relentless desire to obliterate their enemies, to ensure that there is no trace left behind. They fight not just to win, but to make sure no one can ever challenge them again. The Zorith knew they had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and that would prove to be a mistake the galaxy would pay for dearly. The Uthari, a race known for their diplomatic prowess and peacekeeping efforts, had long been the bridge between warring factions across the galaxy. Their leaders, who believed in cooperation above all else, saw humanity as a species in need of guidance. Earth's growing influence was undeniable, and the Uthari, eager to maintain their own dominance in the galactic order, decided it was time to make formal contact. Their approach was simple: a diplomatic envoy, consisting of their finest negotiators and cultural ambassadors, would travel to Earth with an offer of cooperation. They believed the humans could be persuaded to join the Galactic Alliance, sharing their resources and knowledge for mutual benefit. They prepared a lavish display of goodwill, sending their most beautiful ships in a show of peace. However, the Utheri did not understand the one unspoken rule of human existence: never mistake humanity's quiet for weakness. The first sign that things were off came when the Utheri ships entered Earth's orbit. No welcoming signals, no communication requests, just an eerie silence. When they attempted to make contact, their transmissions were met with a cryptic, almost hostile response. The human government gave no formal greeting, only a simple statement: "We are aware of your presence. You have 24 hours to depart, or we will take action." The Utheri envoys, initially confident in their diplomatic superiority, dismissed the warning as an empty threat. They were peaceful. They were respected across the stars. Surely, humans would not risk an intergalactic incident. They were wrong. As the hours ticked by, the atmosphere around the Utheri delegation grew tense. An internal debate began within their ranks. Some pushed for patience, while others urged a more aggressive stance, arguing that humans needed to be taught respect. But before they could reach any consensus, a new message arrived. "Your 24 hours are up." The transmission was sent not by the government, but by an individual, a human military commander known only as General David Cortez. His voice was calm, almost chillingly so, as he issued one final ultimatum: leave or face the consequences. The Utheri Council hesitated, debating whether to respond with threats of their own. But the moment they considered it, disaster struck. Without warning, Earth launched a series of electromagnetic pulses that disabled all external communications and completely neutralized the Utheri's advanced technology. The Utheri ships, once gleaming symbols of peace, were now floating helplessly in space, their shields down and weapon systems offline. They were utterly vulnerable. What followed was a nightmare the Utheri were unprepared for. Human fighter ships, small but highly maneuverable, appeared out of nowhere, swarming the Utheri vessels like predators. The humans didn't waste time with fancy tactics or polite negotiations. They didn't engage in the subtlety the Utheri were accustomed to. Instead, they struck fast and hard, cutting through the Utheri defense grid like a hot knife through butter. A swarm of missiles and automated drones obliterated key systems in seconds, while human gunships fired relentlessly, reducing once pristine ships to molten scraps of debris. The Utheri envoys tried to issue commands to their fleet, but without their communication systems, they were powerless. Their only option was to retreat, but the humans were relentless. Every attempt to escape was met with deadly force. There was no negotiation, no mercy, only destruction. In less than an hour, the Utheri fleet was crippled. A single ship, the flagship, remained intact, but its crew was in chaos, scrambling to control the vessel before it was overwhelmed. The humans gave them no time. They launched a final assault, bombarding the flagship with high-intensity laser fire that tore apart its engines and sent it spiraling out of control into deep space. By the time the humans stopped their attack, there was no question left in the minds of the Utheri. Humanity wasn't a species to be reasoned with. They didn't play by the rules. They didn't care about peace or alliances or trade deals. They only cared about one thing: ensuring their enemies would never return. The surviving Utheri diplomats, shaken and broken, escaped Earth, their reputation in tatters. But even as they fled, they sent word back to the rest of the galaxy. It wasn't just Earth's weapons that were terrifying. It was their mentality. Humans didn't engage in peace talks, didn't attempt to understand their enemies. They simply erased them. The galaxy's most diplomatic species had failed to see the brutal truth. The Utheri had learned a lesson they would never forget. Never underestimate a species that has no concept of mercy. The whispers of humanity's overkill spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the galaxy. And the galaxy now knew one thing for certain: Humanity was not a species to be dealt with lightly. The term overkill was now on the lips of every species across the galaxy. For the first time, an ancient, almost forgotten concept of total annihilation had surfaced from the depths of galactic history, unleashed by none other than humanity. It was something no other civilization understood, a war philosophy that rendered traditional strategies of war and conquest obsolete. The galaxy had long embraced controlled conflict, with the aim of victory with minimal loss, but humans did not share this restraint. The concept of overkill wasn't just a tactical decision for humans, it was embedded in their very nature. They fought with a kind of desperate intensity, one that was built upon their survival instincts and amplified by their ability to adapt and innovate under extreme pressure. The galaxy had known no species like them. The more the ancient races discussed Earth's capabilities, the more they realized that humanity didn't just win battles, they obliterated their opponents, erasing any trace of them in a way that left no room for retaliation. The Sci-Fi, ever the strategists, were the first to begin researching humanity's history and their approach to conflict. What they uncovered was disturbing. Humans had been fighting wars on Earth for centuries, but their nature was far more destructive than any alien species could imagine. The record of humanity's wars was a staggering list of total victories, and each victory was marked by the complete and utter eradication of the enemy. From ancient human history, they found references to wars where entire civilizations had been wiped from existence, not just defeated, but erased from memory. "They are not like us," murmured Talix, one of the Sci-Fi's most esteemed war commanders. "When we fight, we strike where it counts, disable their capacity to resist. Humans fight to ensure there is no future for the enemy. They don't leave the remnants. They don't leave anything." It was during the ongoing discussions of overkill that the truth about humanity's brutal efficiency began to settle like a dark cloud over the galaxy. The Qatari, an aggressive and militaristic species known for their size and strength, were one of the first to question how they should engage with Earth. For years, they had dominated their part of the galaxy through sheer force, laying waste to anyone who dared challenge them. Yet, the Qatari were shaken when a scout fleet sent to Earth returned with a grim report. "We underestimated them," said the fleet commander, a massive Qatari known as Shekur. "We thought we could crush them with ease. But we were wrong. We thought we could defeat their forces and leave it at that. Instead, we watched as a small human faction, with no significant military strength, wiped out a Qatari garrison twice its size. And not just wiped out, they made sure the bodies were destroyed, the equipment obliterated, and even the memories erased. They didn't leave a single soldier alive to speak of it." Shaker's words sent ripples through the Qatari war councils. Humanity wasn't like any other species they had faced. They didn't just want victory. They wanted to ensure that no one would dare challenge them again. Overkill was their message, and it was clear to anyone paying attention. The concept was not just military strategy, but an existential philosophy. The concept of mercy, long revered as the mark of a civil society, became a dangerous myth in the face of humanity's methods. The Sci-Fi's elite commanders analyzed human battle footage, studying human combat strategies. What they found was terrifying. Humans did not hesitate. They did not wait for an enemy to surrender. They crushed the will to fight out of their opponents so thoroughly that it became impossible for those they defeated to ever rise again. It was this revelation that sparked a cold realization across the galaxy. Earth was no longer just a threat. It was an existential force. The very idea of overkill, of obliterating an enemy so thoroughly that not even their history remained, was something that struck fear into the heart of the most battle-hardened civilizations. The Uthari, who had experienced humanity's wrath firsthand, were among the first to realize the implications. They convened an emergency summit to discuss their findings, sending an urgent transmission to the leaders of the galaxy. "We must stop them before they spread their message of annihilation across the stars," one Uthari elder declared, his voice laced with dread. They may be primitive, but their mindset is beyond anything we can understand. They are a virus that consumes everything in its path. The message was clear. The concept of overkill was not merely a strategy for humanity. It was a part of their psyche. And as humanity's influence spread, the galaxy would be forced to reckon with a species that fought not just to win, but to destroy, to erase, and to obliterate all those who stood in their way. The galaxy had never known fear quite like this before. A species that fought to ensure victory at any cost was not just dangerous. It was a force of nature. The reality of humanity's unrelenting nature began to settle across the galaxy, chilling even the most seasoned warriors and diplomats. The concept of overkill had taken root, and its terrifying implications became clear to every species in the galaxy. It wasn't just the humans' advanced technology or their brutal tactics that terrify the galaxy. It was their relentless mentality. A mentality that refused to leave any room for future conflict, ensuring that their enemies could never rise again. As the galaxy's most powerful factions convened, the question on everyone's mind was the same. What could they do to stop humanity? The United Intergalactic Assembly called an emergency meeting with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Their task was clear: devise a strategy to contain Earth before its infection spread further. But the gravity of the situation was not lost on anyone. "Humanity is not like any other species we've encountered," said Valok, the Typhar warlord, his voice echoing through the massive chamber. "They fight with a brutality we cannot understand. They do not stop until the threat is completely eradicated." The Eutheri fleet, the most advanced in the galaxy, was utterly crippled in a matter of hours. A single human commander wiped out an entire fleet of Kitari warships with only a handful of ships. "We cannot underestimate them." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Kitari, whose race was built on military might, had learned the hard way that human tenacity was not something they could simply overpower. Their garrison on Earth had been wiped out by a single coordinated strike, with no warning, no negotiation, just brutal efficiency. The Lissar, the galaxy's leading diplomats, had long been the peacemakers of the galaxy. Their race had brokered peace between warring species, and they were the ones most desperate to find a solution. Yet even they were now at a loss for how to handle the human threat. "We must consider diplomacy," suggested Lysar Ambassador Serena, her voice calm but tinged with worry. "Perhaps if we approach them with open arms, we can persuade them to see reason. We cannot afford to make an enemy of them. They are still new to the galactic stage, and they may not fully understand the consequences of their actions." "Your diplomacy won't work," Valok interjected. "The humans don't understand negotiation. They understand victory. They don't want peace. They want to ensure no one can ever challenge them again." Serena, unbowed, countered, "Then what do you propose, warlord?" "A preemptive strike. To attack them before they can become a greater threat. We've seen what they can do to fleets twice our size. What chance do we have?" Her words hung heavily in the air. The silence that followed spoke volumes. The galaxy had never faced a force like humanity before. The Assembly's greatest minds had been racking their brains, searching for an answer, but the truth was grim. There were no strategies in the galaxy's arsenal that could contend with Earth's tenacity and complete disregard for mercy. The Zorith, having suffered their own humiliating defeat at the hands of the humans, offered no answers. Their once confident intelligence agents had been wiped out with ease, their technologies rendered useless in the face of humanity's ability to adapt and overwhelm. They could only warn others of the one thing they had learned the hard way: do not provoke them. Do not underestimate them. In the midst of this chaos, one of the galaxy's most mysterious and powerful races, the Thrax, an ancient species of bioengineered warriors, offered a chilling proposal: make an alliance with Earth before it's too late. The Thrax had known humanity for far longer than most, and they understood the stark reality of their nature. The Thrax had been observing Earth for centuries, studying its ability to adapt and thrive in hostile environments. The Thrax were also among the first to realize that humanity's true power lay in its drive to survive, by any means necessary. "We may not be able to defeat them in conventional war," said Thrax High Commander Salrath, his voice low and resonant. "But we can join them. If we can convince them that our combined strength will ensure their dominance, they may welcome us as allies." It was an uncomfortable suggestion, but one that many in the assembly found themselves considering. To stand against humanity now would be to risk total destruction. Even the most powerful fleets could not match the sheer will and brutality humanity brought to the table. And so, for the first time in galactic history, the idea of an alliance with Earth, once unthinkable, began to take root. It was a desperate, pragmatic move, born not out of friendship but survival. Humanity, it seemed, had already won the galaxy's respect, if not through diplomacy, then through sheer, unrelenting force. The question was no longer whether the galaxy could stop them. It was whether they could survive the consequences of the only way they knew how to fight: total and utter obliteration. The notion of an alliance with humanity, once anathema to the proud civilizations of the galaxy, was slowly gaining traction. The galaxy had never seen a species like humanity, fearless, relentless, and utterly unforgiving. The other races, from the most intellectual to the most physically imposing, now faced an existential crisis. The threat of humanity's overkill had pushed them to the brink, and their response was a mixture of fear, respect, and a calculated desire to survive. While the United Intergalactic Assembly deliberated, a single human broadcast changed the course of history. It began with a simple transmission, a single human voice echoing across the void, broadcast in every language and format the galaxy could interpret. It was a declaration, not of war, but of a new era. The speaker was General David Cortez, the same officer whose actions had crippled the Eutheri fleet and crushed the Qatari garrison. His message was clear, direct, and bone-chilling in its simplicity. "This is General David Cortez of the United Earth Federation. We have no interest in your alliances or your petty squabbles. We are human, and we fight to ensure there is no one left to challenge us. You have seen what we can do. Understand this. We are not a threat to you unless you stand against us. Should you choose to challenge humanity, you will not survive. You have one choice: join us or be erased." The transmission was brief, but its impact was immediate. Across the galaxy, every species that had ever underestimated humanity now realized the gravity of their position. General Cortez's words resonated like a hammer strike to the chest. Humanity wasn't offering peace. They weren't begging for alliances. They were laying down a gauntlet, and anyone foolish enough to pick it up would find themselves ground into dust. The response was swift. Entire fleets from various species began to mobilize, unsure whether to prepare for war or to submit to humanity's demands. It was the Qatari who moved first. Their pride wounded by their humiliating defeat, they gathered their forces, preparing for a conflict that could determine the future of their species. But they were not alone. Other races, including the Typhar and even the Lissar, began to fortify their defenses, unsure of humanity's true intentions. But as the first human fleet emerged from the depths of space, it became clear that humanity was not just a military force. They were a revolution. Earth's fleets were vast, but their strength lay not in sheer numbers, but in the unparalleled unity and adaptability of their forces. Human ships, sleek and efficient, moved with ruthless precision. Their tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had seen, a strange blend of brute force and unyielding strategy. Humanity did not fight for victory. They fought for total domination. They sought to leave nothing standing. The first major engagement was a harrowing spectacle for the galaxy's assembled forces. The Qatari fleet, far larger and more powerful than humanity's, met them in open space. The Qatari commanders, thinking they could engage with superior firepower, quickly learned how wrong they were. The human ships were nimble, their weaponry designed for maximum destruction in short bursts. The Qatari's massive warships, once the terror of the galaxy, found themselves overwhelmed by the speed and firepower of humanity's assault. But it wasn't just the Qatari technology that failed them. It was their mindset. The Qatari fought with the goal of overpowering their opponents, holding back when they sensed an advantage. But humanity fought without hesitation. Their commanders didn't care about losing ships in battle, so long as the enemy was utterly obliterated. In less than an hour, the Qatari were on the defensive, their once imposing fleet reduced to rubble, their surviving ships scrambling to retreat. But humanity didn't give them the chance. As Qatari ships attempted to flee, human warships pursued, cutting them down one by one. No mercy. No quarter. Every ship that attempted to escape was pursued until it was completely destroyed, their wreckage scattering across the void. The message was clear. In humanity's eyes, the only victory was absolute annihilation. The galaxy's response was a mix of shock, fear, and for some, begrudging admiration. Humanity's first true battle had left no question as to their nature. They were not just conquerors, they were executioners. They didn't just defeat their enemies, they erased them, ensuring that no one could challenge them ever again. In the wake of the battle, the first signs of submission appeared. The Thrax, once hesitant to ally with humanity, sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth, offering to share their advanced biological warfare technologies in exchange for humanity's protection. The Sci-Fi, long the tacticians of the galaxy, began to open lines of communication, their warlords now more interested in making peace than in confrontation. Even the Lissar, who had always believed in empathy and peaceful resolutions, began to reconsider their stance. There was no room for negotiation with humanity. They either joined Earth or faced utter extinction. The galaxy, once a patchwork of independent powers, was now witnessing the birth of a new order, one where humanity stood at the center. The idea of a human dominion was no longer a distant thought. It was becoming a reality. The brutal crushing of the Qatari fleet and humanity's unyielding message sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. No longer were the various factions of the galaxy content to remain isolated or even locked in conflict with one another. The sudden rise of humanity as a terrifying power had forced them to rethink everything they had once held true about diplomacy, war, and survival. The concept of the human dominion had moved from a whispered rumor to a terrifying inevitability. The power dynamics of the galaxy were shifting, and the old order was crumbling beneath the weight of humanity's raw, unrelenting strength. Those who had once considered Earth a backwater planet, insignificant in the grand sweep of galactic history, now watched in terror as their survival became dependent on how they interacted with this new power. One by one, emissaries from various factions arrived at Earth, each carrying with them proposals, offers, and requests. The Qatari, bruised but unbroken, sent their diplomats to seek a more favorable position within this new order. The Sci-Fi, their once proud military commanders now humbled, begged for protection and access to human technology in exchange for their knowledge of galactic strategy and intelligence. Even the Lissar, the diplomatic architects of the galaxy's fragile peace, found themselves negotiating for an alliance that would guarantee their continued existence under humanity's growing shadow. On Earth, the government watched as the galaxy bent and twisted under the weight of humanity's demands. General Cortez, once the leader of a single planetary force, was now the de facto leader of a galactic power. The United Earth Federation, once a modest organization focused on the survival of a single species, had transformed into an empire of unprecedented influence. The concept of a human dominion was no longer just a threat. It was becoming the galaxy's new reality. The first human fleet to arrive in the heart of the galaxy was a symbol of power. No longer was Earth's military a disparate collection of ships and forces. It was an empire in the making. The fleet, vast and imposing, consisted of ships designed for rapid deployment, capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single strike. Each vessel bore the insignia of the United Earth Federation, its flag unfurled proudly, signaling a new era. The response to this fleet was chilling. The great galactic powers that had once dominated the stars now found themselves confronted with an undeniable truth. Humanity was not just a threat. Humanity was now the central force in the galaxy, and no one could afford to ignore them any longer. In a private meeting with his closest advisors, General Cortez outlined the next phase of humanity's expansion. "We are no longer just survivors in a hostile universe," he said, his voice cold and determined. "We are the future, and the future is ours to shape. The galaxy will either accept us, or it will cease to exist." The assembled leaders of the United Earth Federation were fully behind him. The rapid consolidation of human power had left no room for hesitation. Every major species, from the largest to the smallest, now had to reckon with Earth's rising dominance. The old systems of governance, where power was spread across multiple factions, were quickly being replaced by the unyielding grip of the human dominion. But not all were willing to bend to humanity's will. A few, desperate and proud, still believed they could stand against Earth's encroachment. A coalition of rebellious species, led by the Zorith and some remaining Kateri factions, began to form a resistance movement. They sought to maintain some semblance of autonomy in the face of humanity's growing power. However, they were outmatched. The human dominion had already made its mark. General Cortez, in his cold, calculated manner, began to implement the final steps in humanity's campaign for complete galactic supremacy. Human fleets patrolled the borders of their expanding territory, ensuring that no one dared to challenge their dominance. Every world that fell under the human dominion was swiftly brought into the fold through force or negotiation, and once a planet was claimed, it was permanently integrated into the empire. There were no half measures. Those who resisted were erased. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's ruthlessness wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring that no one would ever dare to fight again. The first truly intergalactic war was fast approaching. The Resistance Coalition, made up of the last defiant factions of the galaxy, knew that they were now in a race against time. To stop the human dominion, they would need to unite against Earth's rising power. But with each passing day, that union seemed less and less likely. The galaxy's greatest powers, once capable of standing alone, were now fractured, unable to act in unison against the unstoppable force of humanity. In the depths of the galaxy, under the flickering lights of their dimmed war rooms, leaders of the resistance gathered. They knew the stakes were higher than ever before. Their only hope was to outthink humanity. But they had underestimated Earth's most terrifying asset, its ability to adapt. Humanity wasn't just a species capable of war. It was a species built for survival. And as the stars themselves seemed to burn a little brighter with each victory, it became clear to all who watched. Humanity had no intention of stopping. Their victory was inevitable. The galaxy would bend to their will, or it would burn. And there was nothing anyone could do to prevent it. The dawn of the human dominion had arrived. The galaxy had bent, but it had not yet broken. The human dominion had grown too powerful to ignore, its fleets too numerous, its will too unyielding. Yet the last remnants of resistance refused to fade into the shadows. The galaxy's factions, now fully aware that humanity's expansion was unstoppable, realized the grim truth. They could either submit and survive or die in a futile last stand. But the price of submission had become clear. It meant living in the shadow of humanity's merciless power forever. General Cortez, the architect of humanity's rise, stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out at the endless expanse of space. His eyes, once filled with the hope of a united Earth, had hardened over the years into a gaze of cold determination. The war, the bloodshed, had changed him, but in many ways, it had also shaped the destiny of the galaxy. Humanity's destiny was not to coexist, it was to dominate. And this was only the beginning. His fleet moved swiftly through the galaxy, not to conquer, but to integrate. Humanity had made an art out of diplomacy by force. Each world they brought under their control became a piece of a greater whole. Those who bent the knee were rewarded with peace and prosperity, though it was a peace built upon humanity's iron fist. The alternative, however, was obliteration. The resistance forces, once a glimmer of hope for the galaxy's surviving factions, had begun to fracture under the weight of humanity's growing power. The Zorith, once a proud race of intellectuals, had been crushed in a series of devastating battles. Their last stronghold, a fortress planet hidden deep within a distant star system, had been turned into a floating graveyard after a relentless bombardment. The Qitari, too, had tried to rally in a final desperate bid for survival, but their warlike nature, while formidable, was no match for humanity's precision and overwhelming might. The remnants of their fleets were scattered, their leaders broken, their pride shattered. On the surface of Earth, leaders from the remaining independent species were ushered into the newly formed Galactic Council, a political body under the complete control of the United Earth Federation. It was here that the true face of the human dominion was revealed. They would offer the galaxy two choices: integration or obliteration. Welcome to the new order. General Cortez addressed the council with an eerie calm, his voice reverberating through the chamber. You will either join us in this new era of peace or you will be erased. There is no middle ground. The council members, once powerful leaders in their own right, now sat in uneasy silence, fully aware of the implications. Each one of them had heard the tales of humanity's unstoppable might. They knew that resisting would only lead to their destruction. Some, like the Lissar, had already begun to bend the knee, hoping that their diplomatic prowess would somehow allow them to retain some measure of autonomy under humanity's rule. Others, like the Thraxes, had already pledged their allegiance, aligning themselves with humanity in exchange for protection and favor. But there were still factions that resisted, still a few worlds that thought they could fight back. The Zorith, despite their crushing losses, had sent a final message to their allies, vowing to fight to the end. The Qitari remnants were gathering in secret, forming a last alliance to reclaim their honor. But it was too late. Humanity had already begun to reshape the galaxy in its image. Human dominion warships, now far more advanced and plentiful than they had been in the early days of expansion, continued to patrol every corner of known space. Their reach stretched from one end of the galaxy to the other, and their military presence ensured that no one could challenge their rule. Humanity had become the heart of the galaxy, its influence so deeply embedded that no world, no species, could imagine a future without it. On Earth itself, the people, once humble and divided, had become united under the banner of a single goal: control of the stars. The transition from a planetary power to an intergalactic empire was a smooth one. Advances in technology, once born out of necessity, were now weaponized to maintain humanity's supremacy. Artificial intelligence, once seen as a tool, had become a cornerstone of governance, with vast, interconnected systems ensuring that every aspect of the Dominion was tightly monitored and controlled. The human Dominion had become not just a political entity, but a force of nature. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. An empire not built on diplomacy or military might alone, but on the sheer force of humanity's will. There was no room for weakness, no space for dissent. The very idea of resistance was becoming a myth, an outdated notion belonging to a time before humanity had proven that it could never be defeated. In the final moments of his address, General Cortez's cold smile flickered for a brief moment. The galaxy had now learned the ultimate truth about humanity. Their victory had never been about being the strongest. It had been about being unstoppable. They had been shaped by millennia of struggle, of overcoming adversity, of surviving against all odds. And now, with the galaxy at their feet, they would never relent. The galaxy would belong to them. And with that final declaration, the human dominion was sealed. The galaxy, once a vast tapestry of competing civilizations, had been unified under a single rule. Not through diplomacy, but through the unyielding will of humanity. It was the dawn of an eternal empire, one that would forever be remembered not for its victories, but for its brutal insistence that nothing, no force in the universe, would ever dare challenge it again.